"Mom's sick, so I came instead." Those were the only words I could muster as I held the folder tight against my chest, feeling the weight of both the papers and the impossible responsibility sitting squarely on my small shoulders. I was 9 years old, and the idea of walking into the CEO's office arena of sharp suits, clipped tones, and eyes that judged every second felt like stepping into another world entirely. Mom had been my rock, guiding me through life's smaller challenges, but now she was bedridden with the flu, coughing and pale, insisting I handle this meeting in her place. I didn't want to, and yet the thought of disappointing her, of letting her sacrifice go unrepresented, twisted my stomach into knots. My tiny legs carried me through the polished lobby, past people whose brief glances barely registered me, and I felt the tug of fear and awe. Every echo of my shoes against the marble floor reminded me how out of place I was, how big this world was compared to my little frame. The air smelled of coffee and ambition, sharp and unrelenting, and I wished for invisibility, wishing somehow that my presence wouldn't be noticed. And yet, with every step toward the CEO's door, a strange resolve settled over me. I was small, yes, but I was here, and I couldn't turn back. Even if my mind screamed that I should, I clutched Mom's folder like a shield as I straightened my little backpack, imagining it made me look more professional than I actually was. My heart hammered in my chest as I adjusted my oversized sweater, hoping no one would laugh at how small I was, how obviously out of place. The elevator ride felt like a journey to another planet. The mirrored walls reflected a nervous, wide-eyed girl surrounded by suits and business chatter that sounded like a foreign language. Each pang of the floors passing by tightened my stomach, as if the building itself was reminding me of my insignificance. People glanced at me with a mix of curiosity and barely concealed amusement. One man, tapping on his tablet, gave me a dismissive nod, like I was a fleeting distraction, not someone worthy of attention. I could feel my cheeks flush, and my fingers squeezed the folder so hard it left dents in the cardboard. Every step toward the CEO's office seemed measured in miles, the marble floors amplifying my small, hesitant footfalls. The air smelled of ambition, coffee, and something I couldn't name. I felt in every fiber of my being power. My tiny heart beat faster as I imagined the stories the people around me were telling themselves about this little girl wandering into their world. They don't know who they're messing with, I whispered to myself, trying to conjure courage from the tiniest spark of audacity. I thought about Mom, lying sick at home, trusting me to speak for her, and the weight of that responsibility pressed down harder than the tallest skyscraper outside the window. I was just a child, yes, but every glance, every smirk from the adults I passed reminded me of the invisible line I was about to cross. And even as fear quelled in my chest, a strange determination took root. If I could survive this, even just a little, maybe I can make them see that courage doesn't come in tall packages. The receptionist barely looked up as I approached the gleaming glass doors. When she finally spoke, her voice carried that mix of disbelief and polite skepticism. "You're here for the meeting?" I nodded, my throat dry, the folder trembling slightly in my hands. The door slid open, revealing the CEO's officer room that seemed designed to swallow anyone smaller than its massive mahogany desk. And there he was, the man whose reputation preceded him, sitting behind the desk with a perfectly tailored suit, an expression that combined curiosity with barely concealed disdain. His eyes landed on me, and for a moment, I felt like an insect caught in a magnifying glass, every detail of my small frame scrutinized. "And you are?" His tone was calm but loaded, the kind that could slice through confidence before it had a chance to form. I'm here for my mom," I stammered. "She's sick, so I came instead." He raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair, and a faint, incredulous smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Your mom sent you?" he asked, as if the concept were so absurd it required repetition. I nodded again, swallowing hard. The contrast between us could not have been more glaring. Him, composed, commanding, radiating authority. Me, tiny, trembling, barely keeping my hands from shaking, clutching a folder that felt far too heavy for me to carry. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, eyes narrowing. I don't usually see children in meetings like this. You do understand what's at stake, right? I forced myself to meet his gaze, trying to ignore the pounding of my heart and the prickling of everyone else's eyes on me. I know what my mom needed me to do, I whispered, my voice firmer than I felt. His gaze flicked to the folder, and for a second, the amusement softened just a fraction. Then he smirked again, shaking his head slightly, muttering under his breath, he didn't think I belonged here. I took a deep breath and opened the folder, forcing my trembling hands to be steady. Every page was Mom's work, meticulously prepared, her notes underlined and highlighted, a roadmap she had trusted me to follow. My mom asked me to present her proposal, I said, my voice shaking, but gaining strength with each word. The CEO's eyes narrowed, and a thin, sharp smile crossed his face. A child presenting to me. Are you serious? He asked, voice dripping with disbelief. My stomach lurched, but I forced myself to continue. I went through each point carefully, quoting Mom's research, emphasizing the value she had built over years of effort. The more he scoffed and interrupted, the tighter my chest felt. But also, strangely, the more my resolve hardened. Every belittling remark, every condescending glance, ignited a small fire inside me. I've watched Mom work nights without complaint. I thought, she sacrificed everything for this project, and I won't let anyone erase her effort, not even him. He leaned back, folding his arms, his expression one of thinly veiled mockery. Do you really think you're qualified to discuss strategy with me? He asked. My throat went dry, but I answered, I might be small, but I know what my mom wanted. I'm here to make sure her work is heard. For a moment, the room fell quiet. I could feel the weight of every adult in that office, their expectations, their doubts. And yet, as I glanced at the documents, remembering how Mom had sacrificed sleep, time, and countless weekends to perfect every detail, courage blossomed in me. I wasn't just a little girl anymore. I was a messenger, carrying the authority of her hard work. And I realized that bravery sometimes meant standing even when the world expected you to sit down. As the CEO droned on, outlining figures and strategies with the kind of confidence that made walls seem to bend in deference to his authority, I kept my eyes on the folder in my lap. Something fell off. One of the projections he proudly displayed didn't match the numbers in Mom's detailed reports. My pulse quickened as I realized I had spotted a mistake, a gap in his otherwise flawless presentation. I glanced round the room. The other executives were nodding along blindly, completely unaware. My hand shook slightly as I raised one finger, a small, timid gesture that nonetheless demanded attention. Excuse me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I think there's a discrepancy here. The room froze. The CEO's eyes darted toward me, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. He raised a brow, clearly amused, perhaps even condescending, yet intrigued. I pointed to the page in Mom's folder, carefully explaining the mismatch in figures. My explanation was simple but precise, the kind that could have been missed by anyone not paying full attention. The murmurs began. Other executives leaned closer, some whispering, some casting glances at the CEO, waiting for his reaction. His jaw tightened ever so slightly, the only outward sign that the little girl in front of him had just done something he hadn't anticipated. My heart thudded in my chest, a mix of fear and triumph. Would he acknowledge it, or would he dismiss me, brush it off, and continue his performance as if I had never spoken? I held my breath, the folder clutched to my chest, realizing that sometimes even the smallest voice could create a ripple. But would anyone notice this ripple before it faded? The room went silent, the kind of heavy silence that made my ears ring. The CEO leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he studied the folder, then back at me. Wait, that's correct, he said, his voice tight, just above a whisper, as if admitting it out loud hurt him. I swallowed hard, forcing my hands to stay steady. Yes, sir, I replied, my voice firmer now. These numbers match my mom's records exactly. His eyes flicked around the room, and I could see the tension ripple through the other executives. Some of them exchanged stunned glances, clearly surprised that a 9-year-old had spotted what they hadn't. You noticed this?" he asked, leaning back, trying to regain his composure. I nodded. I read through all of her notes, and I wanted to make sure nothing was overlooked. This could affect the entire proposal. He ran a hand through his hair, jaw tight. "I didn't expect a child to challenge my presentation," he said, almost as if the words themselves tasted wrong. I felt a strange mix of fear and triumph. The power dynamic had shifted, if only slightly. All the assumptions about me being small, inexperienced, invisible, they were unraveling. Yet, his face remained unreadable, a mask that hid whether he was impressed, annoyed, or plotting some comeback. I realized I was teetering on a knife's edge. One wrong move, one misstep in my explanation, and this moment of subtle victory could vanish. He didn't smile, didn't scold, didn't even react in the predictable way I'd imagined. And as I looked at him, holding my breath, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. He didn't know what he was going to do next. I remembered the countless evenings I spent sitting on the floor of Mom's home office, surrounded by stacks of papers, spreadsheets, and invoices that seemed to stretch to the ceiling. While other kids were playing or watching cartoons, I was learning the language of deadlines, projections, and client demands. Mom would explain each line patiently, showing me how every number mattered, how every signature carried weight. I never realized it at the time, but those nights had been training grounds, moments that had quietly prepared me for this very room. I recalled how I had asked questions, double-checked figures, and even suggested minor corrections, only to be told I was too young to understand. Back then, I had felt dismissed, invisible, and small, the very emotions that now burned inside me like fuel. And yet, all of it had given me a secret advantage. I knew the patterns, the potential errors, the points where assumptions could fail. The CEO may have towered over me in stature and authority, but I had knowledge he didn't expect a child to possess. Every time he glanced down at my folder, he couldn't see the hours of preparation and overlooked effort behind it. I had the moral and intellectual high ground, and it was time to see how far that advantage could stretch. The child he underestimated was quietly ready to turn the tables. The CEO's eyes narrowed, and I could see the shift in his posture. He was used to commanding attention, to bending every conversation to his will. "Let's move on," he said sharply, flipping to another slide, trying to regain control of the meeting. My palms were sweating, but I forced myself to stand taller, holding the folder like a shield. "Actually," I said, with steady, "I think this point needs a closer look." Heads turned, some with surprise, some with impatience. He glanced at me, incredulous. "You're questioning my strategy?" he asked, a thin edge of irritation in his tone. "I'm not questioning you," I said. "I'm just making sure Mom's work, which represents years of effort and careful planning, isn't dismissed." There it was, the first crack in his confident exterior. He leaned back, studying me, as if trying to figure out how to react to a 9-year-old who dared speak like an equal. I pointed out a specific clause he had overlooked, walking through the numbers and logic that supported Mom's approach. Each time he opened his mouth to interrupt, I preempted with clarity and evidence, refusing to let the moment be hijacked. The executives in the room were leaning in, nodding subtly, recognizing the legitimacy of what I was saying. I could feel the tide turning. The power reversal was subtle but undeniable. The underdog, the little girl no one expected to make sense, was now steering the conversation, forcing the CEO to listen. His eyes flickered, a mix of disbelief and frustration, while the audience, now fully engaged, shifted their attention from him to me. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Every point I made chipped away at his assumed authority, and with each nod from the other executives, I realized that courage, preparation, and persistence could turn even the smallest voice into one that commanded respect. By the end of the exchange, it wasn't just about Mom's work anymore. It was about showing that judgment based on size or age could be fatally flawed. And the room, now silent except for my voice. For witness to it, I kept my eyes glued to the folder, flipping through the last few pages, when something caught my attention, a clause buried deep in one of the contracts Mom had highlighted months ago. My stomach twisted as I realized what it meant. The CEO had overlooked a significant obligation, one that could have serious consequences for the company if left unaddressed. But it went beyond a simple error. Reading between the lines, I saw that this wasn't an accident, it was deliberate, a corner-cutting maneuver that prioritized profit over ethics. My small hands trembled as I processed it. Could I, a 9-year-old, actually confront this in front of the board, in front of everyone? I swallowed hard and then spoke, voice calm but deliberate. Sir, I think there's something here that needs immediate attention. The CEO's confident smirk faltered. I pointed to the clause, explaining clearly how ignoring it could result in legal repercussions and financial loss. The room went silent. Executives leaned forward, murmuring, scanning the documents for themselves. The CEO's eyes widened for the first time, the mask of authority cracking. How did you notice this? He asked, almost incredulously, his voice tight. I shrugged lightly, fighting the urge to tremble. I've been helping my mom with her work for years, I said softly. I know the details, and I make sure nothing gets overlooked. That includes things some people might think are too small to matter. A nervous tension rippled through the room. The CEO opened his mouth, then paused, realizing that the small girl in front of him had just exposed an oversight he never thought would be discovered. I could see the disbelief in his eyes, the subtle tightening of his jaw, as he silently acknowledged that his carefully constructed image of control had been undermined. In that moment, I felt a surge of vindication, not just for myself, but for Mom, for all the sacrifices she had made and the dismissals she had endured. The power had shifted, and it was irreversible. The adults who had underestimated me now had no choice but to confront the truth. For a brief moment, I felt invincible, as if the weight of being small had transformed into the sharpest weapon I could wield. And yet, even as I stood there, confident in the correctness of my claim, a flicker of uncertainty lingered in my mind. How would he respond? Would he fight back, or would justice finally, undeniably, prevail? The room was electric, every pair of eyes now fixed on the documents I held and the words I had spoken. The CEO's usual composure was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped tension I had never seen before. I took a deep breath and spoke again, this time louder, firmer. If this clause is ignored, it could cost the company millions and damage our reputation. Mom wouldn't let that happen, and neither will I. A hush fell over the boardroom. Executives shuffled papers, nodding silently, confirming what I had pointed out. I could feel the shift in the energy of the room. What had started as skepticism and amusement had transformed into attention, even admiration. The CEO's eyes darted between me and the others, clearly calculating how to regain control. But there was no way to undo what had just been exposed. You're right, he finally admitted. His voice clipped, a shadow of humility creeping in. I overlooked it. I couldn't help a small, victorious smile, though I kept my tone professional. The board members murmured in agreement, and one executive, quietly, but unmistakably, said, "She saved us from a huge mistake." My chest swelled, not with arrogance, but with a sense of justice fulfilled. For so long, Mom had carried the weight of her expertise being dismissed, her years of work overlooked. Today, I was her voice, and the truth could no longer be ignored. The CEO, once untouchable, now sat rigid, his authority diminished, and I realized that power isn't always measured in size, age, or title. It's measured in knowledge, courage, and the willingness to stand up when it matters most. As the meeting concluded, people approached me, patting my shoulder, whispering congratulations, astonished that a little girl could command the attention and respect of an entire board. I thought of Mom lying sick at home and imagined her pride radiating through me. This small act, seemingly impossible at the start, had transformed the room, reminded everyone present that underestimation is dangerous, and reaffirm that justice isn't reserved for those with power, it belongs to anyone brave enough to claim it. I left the room feeling lighter, stronger, and quietly triumphant, knowing that sometimes the smallest voice could echo louder than the loudest authority. I stepped through the front door, still clutching the folder, heart pounding in a way that felt different from fear. It was a mix of relief, pride, and exhaustion. Mom was sitting in her favorite chair, pale, but smiling faintly, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. "You went?" she asked softly, voice hoarse from illness, but filled with curiosity and something else, hope. I nodded, sinking into the couch beside her. "I did what you asked," I whispered. Her hand reached for mine, squeezing gently, a silent acknowledgement of all the late nights, lessons, and sacrifices she had made to prepare me without me even realizing it. I told her everything, the CEO's disbelief, the overlook clause, the board's reactions, the way they had all finally listened. Her eyes shimmered, tears threatening to spill, and I felt the weight of all those years of unnoticed effort lift a little. "You were brave," she said, her voice catching, more than I ever imagined. In that moment, I realized that courage isn't about size or age, it's about standing for what's right, even when everyone expects you to be small, weak, or invisible. The adult world outside hadn't changed entirely, but in that house, in that small living room, a sense of balance had been restored. Mom's sacrifices were finally honored, and I had discovered a new strength in myself, a quiet empowerment that would stay with me long after the meeting was over. And though the world still had its challenges, its dismissals and harsh judgments, I felt ready to face them, armed with knowledge, courage, and the understanding that even the smallest voice can create change. The days following the meeting were surreal. News of the little girl who had corrected a CEO and saved the company from a costly oversight spread quietly among the executives, whispered in hallways, shared over emails, and even celebrated in team meetings. The CEO's usual aura of untouchable authority had softened. Colleagues now approached him with a subtle caution, aware that even the smallest misstep could be noticed and challenged. For me, the change was more personal. People who had initially dismissed me as just a child began seeking my input, asking questions, and nodding when I spoke. Even clients who had previously overlooked Mom's work now respected our attention to detail and dedication. I realized that intelligence, careful observation, and courage could dismantle assumptions built over decades. I felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that fairness and diligence had triumphed over arrogance and prejudice. The world outside had not disappeared, nor had the challenges vanished, but the small victories, the acknowledgement of truth, the recognition of effort, and the respect earned provided a sense of closure. For the first time, I understood that power wasn't about height, age, or title. It was about standing firm, seeing clearly, and acting decisively when it mattered most. Sitting quietly later that evening, I reflected on everything that had happened, the fear, the disbelief, the moments when I thought I might crumple under the weight of the adult world. I realized how much I had learned, not just about business or numbers, but about courage, fairness, and resilience. Life isn't always about who has the biggest office or the loudest voice. Sometimes it's about noticing the small details, understanding the hidden truths, and standing up for what's right, even when others doubt you. I thought about how the CEO had underestimated me, how assumptions about age, size, or status had blinded him, and how easily people dismiss those they see as weaker. And yet, those who are overlooked often have the sharpest insight, the deepest preparation, and the quietest strength. I felt empathy for anyone who had ever been dismissed, invisible, or undervalued, and validation for those who quietly persevere. Mom's sacrifices, the lessons she had taught me, and the trust she placed in my abilities had shaped me into someone capable of turning a moment of fear into one of empowerment. In that reflection, the narrative arcs of my journey, the challenge, the reversal, the vindication finally settled, leaving a sense of closure and a subtle, lingering reminder: knowledge, courage, and heart can defy even the most rigid hierarchies. As I tucked the folder away and watched Mom drift into a peaceful sleep. I couldn't help but smile at the strange turn of events. A little girl had walked into a CEO's office, carrying nothing but courage, knowledge, and a promise to honor her mother, and had changed the course of an entire meeting. The world outside remained vast, complex, and often unfair. But in that moment, I understood something profound. Justice doesn't always arrive loudly or perfectly, yet when it does, it can shift everything. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and treated as too small to matter, yet my voice had been heard, my insight recognized, and my courage validated. It was empowering, humbling, and bittersweet all at once, proof that even the youngest, quietest presence can leave a lasting mark when fueled by love, preparation, and conviction. Mom sick, so I came instead. I thought again, realizing that sometimes showing up is the first and most powerful act of justice.